All right. I'm actually doing 2 videos today. I haven't done 2 videos in one day. I don't know if I've ever done 2 videos in one day. I'm sure I have, but I don't really recall. But I'm doing 2 videos today. And this video sets up the next video I'm going to do. And I need to get better at just saying when I'm going live. I just press record. I don't tell nobody nothing. So I want to thank you for those of you that watch these live streams, because you just get the notification and you just jump on. All right. But we're going to talk about something today that I think, we should all, if you're a believer, be impressed with the words of Jesus. But there are some times when Jesus says, it's just like, so anyway, I'm doing 2 videos today. This is one of 2. This video will set up the video tonight. And it's going to be, tonight's video is, it's a sad reality, but it's a situation now that has gone public. But I want to bring it up because, well, you'll see tonight. So I'm live streaming again at 8 o'clock tonight. And this video is part 1 of what I'm going to say. But this is general. Tonight's video will be very specific. Very, very specific. But first things first. Welcome to CNN. I'm your host, the underdog, Kirk Kennedy, Kirk Didog. I'm your host. Let's go in. On this channel, we take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. And this is why the people who get mad at me because they don't want me to expose the deeds of darkness on their side. I believe in order to really be a follower of Jesus, look, Jesus would bust the Pharisees' heads and the disciples' heads all in the same passage, right? So I expose the deeds of darkness. I'm not on anybody's side except the side where blood and water came out of Jesus. Everything else, I don't care about. So if you're offended, I get it. Stay there. All right, if you are a believer, if you are a follower of the way, if you are a fear of the Lordian, a Christian, if you are of the Christian tradition and you put your faith in Jesus, the actual biblical view of Jesus. If that's you, then you know that tomorrow's not promised to anyone. And James, we are warned to not speak as if tomorrow's promised, but the day of the Lord is. And that's a future day. That is a tomorrow. It's not our immediate tomorrow, but there's a tomorrow that's coming that's promised where every knee will bow and every tongue confess. And so we want to remember the future right there, right there, right there. And I want to thank all the people that have been subscribing, some new subscribers. We still are a bit of a ways away. Listen, I know the drill. Listen, I see the analytics. People love watching the show, but you don't want to like and subscribe. Why? Like and subscribe to the channel so we can grow. All right. As I said earlier, I'm live streaming again tonight at 8 o'clock for a very serious situation. And it's very serious. So I'm going to live stream at 8 p.m. I want to talk today because I want to reference what I say now, hopefully, tonight. I'm more thinking about what I'm going to talk about tonight. If Jesus only said this, if this were the only thing that Jesus said, it would be insufficient, obviously, because Jesus said a lot. But if he only said this, we would have an accurate picture of what I would call modern American Christendom, or I like symbolism, and I like symmetry. So contemporary American Christendom, right? The CAC. If Jesus only said this, I think a lot of times many of us are trying to find out what is happening right now. We all believe that we're hearing from God. We all believe that our interpretations of the Bible are legitimate. We all believe that everything we're doing is honoring to the Lord. We all want to believe that for the most part. But we're in such a confused state in our modern culture as it pertains to being a professing believer. We're in such a confused state. And Jesus said something almost 2,000 years ago that I think if I'm understanding what he's saying accurately, if I get it. Now, granted, when Jesus said things, he was taught. The Bible does this a lot, but Jesus did this specifically. He spoke to two audiences always, right? Jesus always spoke to the people directly in front of him. And that's why he uses a lot of stories, parables, different analogies. These things all deal with the people that are in front of him. Like when we hear stuff like about old wineskins and new wineskins, we have no idea. I don't use no wineskin. You know, that sounded like something you drink or a little fragrance you might put on some old new wineskins. We don't talk like that, right? So Jesus's immediate audience were a bunch of people who were farmers, worked in the fields. So he did a lot of agriculture parables and analyzing and analogies and all these different things. They were agriculturally based, or they were based on the culture. So Jesus always spoke to the people in front of him, to the people that he knew would listen to him later. So our job is to take things that don't necessarily or weren't specifically speaking to us and figure out how do we apply it. How do we take an agricultural analogy and apply it when we're largely technological, not agricultural? Yes, there's farms and things like that. How do we do that? Well, there's one thing that if Jesus only said this would explain a lot about where contemporary American Christianity is. And I'm saying this is in America. My context is America. So let's go. Let's go to this particular scene. And we're going to see Jesus use an analogy or parable that we're going to break down. That I'm going to take this parable and apply it in modern terms. I think we're supposed to do that. And we'll see how this breaks down. And this will prepare us for the sad video I'm going to make at 8 p.m. tonight. All right? Having said that, let's go to the passage. This is the parable of the sower, Mark 4. Many of us are familiar with this. I'm going to read it somewhat quickly, and then I want to break down what I mean about contemporary American Christianity and why there's so much confusion, not just on what is it like once saved, always saved, but so much confusion on what's really happening in terms of people's profession of faith and what they demonstrate. All right, so let's go here to this. Here's what Jesus says. And Mark tells us this. And he began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered about him, so that he got into the boat and sat in it on the sea, and the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. And he was teaching them many things in parables. And in his teaching he said to them, listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured it. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. And other seeds fell into good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold. And he said, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And when he was alone, those around him with the 12 asked him about the parables. And he said to them, to you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God. But for those outside, everything is in parables, so that they may indeed see but not perceive, and may indeed hear but not understand, lest they should turn and be forgiven. And he said to them, do you not understand this parable? How then will you understand all parables? The sower sows the word, and these are the ones along the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown on rocky ground, the ones who, when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy. And they have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. Then, when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are the ones sown among thorns. They are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches and the desires for other things enter in and choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. But those that were sown on the good soil are the ones who hear the word and accept it and bear fruit 30-fold, 60-fold, and 100-fold. So this is what Jesus teaches. If Jesus only said this parable, if he only said this, this would greatly describe contemporary American Christianity. All right? Let me explain why I'm saying this. So Jesus teaches this parable, and he basically says, I'm not going to read through the whole thing again. I'm just going to bring it to the part where we need to look at. He gives this parable, right? This parable is 4 different groups of people and their response to the word, which is the gospel message, right? So Jesus is highlighting 4 different groups of people and how they'll respond to the message. This is what he's doing, all right? The first group of people, he says the word was sown. So you have to understand something about what he's saying here. The word was sown. That means initially, the people, all of these groups of people initially responded in some form of belief. Like when it was sown, that means it was planted in. That's what it means, it was sown, right? It was sown, it was planted. So these people heard it, it was planted. They may have initially believed it, but it says the devil comes and takes it away. And then in the parable, he said a bird comes and snatches it and takes it away, right? The second group of people are the people where they landed on the rock, right? Landed on the rock. And this is, I think it's important to see what he says about this group. So we are going to go up. Listen to what he says here. And he says in verse 5, other seed fell on rocky ground where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. All right, this is what he's saying about that. What he describes that is in verse 16, and the ones sown on the rocky ground are the ones who, when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy, and they have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. Then when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. This is where we get the most confused. So it's important to hear what Jesus is saying, because this is, so you got the first group of people believe, but then the devil takes it away. They're no longer responding, right? But this group of people, they respond and they bore some fruit. The seed was planted and it says they immediately sprung up, right? And this is important what Jesus says right here. And especially when he describes it in over here in verse 6. He says this, it did not have much soil and immediately sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. But then he later describes it as, they have no root in themselves. They received it, and they endure for a while, right? So these people, when you're not rooted, you can still believe in Jesus and endure for a while, right? So it's what we would call in modern day language, you are believing on your own strength, right? This is what he's trying to say. There are people who receive the word, they believe it, they believe the gospel, they respond to it, what appears to be faith, and they endure for a while. They can hang with it for a while, right? But they're not rooted. They can hang. We need to remember Jesus's words, because we are getting confused about who's a believer, because Jesus is saying it's possible for you to believe, hear the gospel, respond, endure for a while, but you're not rooted. And then when persecution, tribulation or persecution arises on the account of the word, immediately they fall away. Keep in mind that 2 Timothy 3:12 says, indeed, all who desire to live a godly life will be persecuted. So when it's time to be godly, what Jesus is saying, when tribulation or persecution comes, which will come because you're trying to be godly. You can't live in Satan's world and try to be like Jesus and not experience persecution. You will experience it from the world, you will experience it from the enemy, and you will experience it from your own flesh. You'll desire to sin in ways and do things that don't honor the Lord. Jesus says it's possible to make a profession of faith, not really be rooted, and then when it becomes too difficult, at some point, you're walking away. It's a wrap. I'm done. They fall away. They fall away. Please remember what I'm saying now, because when I go live at 8 o'clock, I'm going to refer back to it. When I go live with just a sad reality, is that they fall away. And then there are others, and this is the most important group to me. This group of people, to me, to understand contemporary American Christianity, this is the most important group, what I'm about to read. He says this, when he says that the other seed was sown, and let me read what he says, actually, the way he said it, and then we'll look at how he described it. He said this: other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain, right? So it fell among thorns, the thorns grew up and choked it. And then here's what he says about that here, right? So it fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up with it. Now remember, in a different story, Jesus gave an analogy, a parable, where a farmer sowed the seed, and the next day or over some time, as the seed grew, they were like, hey, there's tares in there with the wheat. And then the farmer said, an enemy has done this. And they said, should we go take out the tares? And he said, no, let the wheat and the tares grow up. And when they fully matured, then go through and take out all the tares, bundle them up, and then throw them into the fire. It was an analogy saying that there will be wheat and tares that grow up together. People who profess to believe will look like people who don't really believe. They'll grow up together. They may be in the same church. They experience some of the same things. These people, they grow up together. They look the same, right? He said that the thorns choked out the word. So it's entangled. It grew up together, right? And the way he describes those people are this. He says in verse 18, and others are sown among thorns. Remember, the thorns grow up together is what he said. He said, these are those who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches and the desires for other things enter in and choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. Now remember, in an analogy, he said it grows up together. Here he's saying these things enter in and choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. Let me tell you why this is, both of these, the rock and this, but I think this is one of the most important ones that we see today. And let me tell you why. The fourth seed are those who bore fruit 30, 60, and 100-fold, right? That's what we all want to be, those of us who are fear of the Lordians. But the third seed, choked by the word, grows up. Let me tell you why this is important. And you'll understand later when I go live tonight at 8 p.m. This is important because what Jesus is describing is what we would call today, like, I think, syncretism, where these two things are combined together and they form into a new sort of reality, right? This is what Jesus is describing. There will be people who will hear the word and initially profess to be believers, right? But then the cares of the world, the deceit, he doesn't describe what cares of the world are, but obviously it's more than what it means that you care about the world more than Jesus. The deceitfulness of riches and the desires for other things enter in and choke the word. So here's what Jesus is saying. There's a group of people who will hear the word, but they will become intertwined with things that have nothing to do with the gospel. They have nothing to do. So he describes them as the cares of the world. There are cares of the world that have nothing to do with bearing fruit for the kingdom, right? The deceitfulness of riches that have nothing to do with bearing fruit for the kingdom. And the desires for other things that have nothing to do. But let me tell you why this is the most important seed. Because the seed with the rock, it said, when trouble comes because of the word, they wither away. They walk away from the faith, right? So they reject it. Those are the people that we would say are apostates. When we hear them like, well, this guy was a believer, she was a believer, now they're walking away from the faith. They reject. That's obvious. But in this seed, it says that they grew together. Let me tell you what I think Jesus is trying to say here. The people who are who have the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the desires for other things that choke the word and prove unfruitful. I don't think these people are walking away from the faith like the people who were on the rock that sprouted up but didn't have good fruit, no good soil. The people who are choked with the word, I don't think they realize that they are. And they're growing up with it, but they're Christians, but the desires for these other things are choking out the word, and it proves to be unfruitful. They don't bear fruit. They don't. This is important because I think what's happening in contemporary American Christianity, what we're seeing, what I call theological and things like that, what we're seeing is things that you incorporate, you include with your Christianity, and they take precedent over what's remotely pleasing and obedient to Jesus. What I think that looks like in the modern context, I think it looks like politics. I know some people that are so afraid of the opposing political party, so afraid of an economic system that will take away their finances, so concerned with all these other dynamics. But these people don't realize they're not Christians. It's grown into them. Jesus said they fell among the thorns and they grew together. So these people aren't walking away from Christianity like the people who were on the rock that sprouted up and withered away. This group of people, they are saying they're Christians, but they're adding all these other things to their Christianity, right? This syncretism, and they're saying this is what you got to do to be a Christian. They're adding all these things and they don't even see it because the cares of the world. And let me tell you what happens. When Jesus says they bear fruit 30, 60, and 100-fold, Jesus is talking about character. Jesus isn't talking about works. He's talking about character. Now, we do produce, Galatians 6:10. So as we have opportunity, therefore, do good to everyone, especially those in the household of faith. That's true. There are aspects of, there's fruit, there's works. But Jesus is mainly talking about character. Talking about character. These people bear fruit 30, 60, and 100-fold. He's talking about character, obedience, how you live, the fruits of the Spirit displayed in your life. He's not talking about these other things. We know this because in Matthew 7, people said, didn't we not do miracles in your name and cast out mighty demons in your name and do all these things? He said, I don't know you. You workers of lawlessness. So Jesus is saying you can do works that God may allow to bear fruit. He told the people that the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat in Matthew 23. These people I'm still going to allow to teach you. Learn from them, but don't imitate them. Right? They're not going to make it. God's still going to use them, but they're not going to make it. So here Jesus is saying that these people who hear the word, they profess to be believers, the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the desires for other things choke out the word. This right now is probably, and I'm not the Lord. I'm not the Lord. I'm not trying to save self-righteously. I'm just fighting hard to be one of the 30, 60, or 100-fold. So I'm not saying this with any insight, like with arrogance, as if I know, because I don't know. But I'm going to make a statement that I think is true based on what I see. Is that this group of people is the majority of professing Christians in America. You got the people who just outright don't believe. You have the people who once did believe and they walk away once it becomes, hey, if you're going to be persecuted for godliness, I don't want that. I'm tripping. I want to have sex. I want to do the things I'm not supposed to do. Right? But then you have this third group of people that I think is the largest group of professing Christians in America. The cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the desires for other things. And I'm watching people lose their morality because they think love is love. They think inclusivity is what it means to imitate Jesus and bear fruit. And that inclusivity is choking out the biblical word, the real word. There are people who are like, we got to get the bag. I know a lot of believers who were trying to listen to Andrew Tate about how to be successful. We got to get the bag. We got to get money. I know churches. We know of these churches and pastors who were just robbing their flocks. You got people, Christians, who care more about trying to secure this particular, they're waiting for their blessing, their breakthrough, their purpose from the Lord. Newsflash, there is no blessing, breakthrough, or purpose. There's good old-fashioned obey the word. And whatever comes from that is a gift from the Lord. The Lord doesn't owe you a blessing, a breakthrough, or purpose. He doesn't owe us anything. He gave us himself. But you got all these people waiting for this. And usually, most of those people, the blessing, the breakthrough, or the purpose is usually connected to some monetary desire or some relational dynamic. It's rare. I don't hear any of those people. Saying, man, I hope that my blessing, breakthrough, and purpose is more righteousness. Even though Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. I don't hear none of that. It's always some Americanized blessing that has to do with a greater source of wealth or income. I just saw a YouTube video. I didn't watch the video. I saw the thumbnail and the title. It said, God wants to make you a millionaire, but you have to ... And I bet that thing had a lot of people, 20-something, 30-something thousand people clicked on that video. God warns the rich more than anyone else. Do you know God really warns the poor at all in the Bible? He says, I'm there for the poor. I'm there for the poor. I'm there for the downtrodden. I'm there for those people. But he warns the rich all the time. And we have this syncretistic sort of Christianity that says we got to get the bag. We got to fight for an economic system that allows us more access to more money. And I'm not knocking capitalism. I'm grateful for it. But I'm not so grateful for it and so afraid of losing it that the character that God is after, I'm willing to forego that. If Jesus only said this parable, he would describe contemporary American Christianity. And this seed is the biggest. The second seed is the most confusing, right? Those who walk away, because we think, and this is a separate video, but I'm going to say this. We think that conversion, when we believe in Jesus, we think that's the end. We think that we tell people you're saved when you made a profession of faith and said a sinner's prayer, even though there's no sinner's prayer in the Bible. That's something that someone just said, hey, this means you're saved. We don't know that, right? But that's what's happened. So the people who, because we think confession is, that's it, they made it, then when they walk away, we're like, what in the world? Because we don't have the categories that Jesus has in this Bible. He said there are some people who will hear the word. Listen to this. And I'm not trying to say this self-righteously. I'm afraid. I want to make sure I'm not one of these people. And he said this. He said, the sun rose, it was scorched. Since it had no root, it withered away. And when he explained it, in verse 17, he said, they have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. Then when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, they fall away. Those are people. And then we see that and we're confused, like, wait a minute. I thought this person was a believer. Jesus said they can believe and endure for a while, is his words. They're endure for a while. But then when tribulation or persecution arises on the kind of word, they immediately fall away. They dip. We get the most confused by those people because we're wondering, like, well, what? I thought they were saved and we're all discombobulated. But we get the most deceived by the third group of people because they're the ones that profess faith. They don't walk away. They just grow up. They just include conservative politics in it, leftist ideology in it. They include, you gotta be serious about, they include faithfulness is getting a degree and making a certain amount of money, which is the American dream. They include these other things that they want to be liked by the world. They want to have status in the world. They want to have all these things and not realizing that you have connected that and it's so intertwined with your relationship with God that you're not even bearing fruit for the kingdom. You will be offended. I watch Christians who say that they're believers. Some of these men are pastors who will call people out and sin against people just because you don't agree with the secular moralistic philosophy that I agree with. That has nothing to do with following Jesus. You will not find a credible translation that tells us how to vote, that tells us what to believe politically. You will not find a credible translation. We do our best. We figure it out. But you won't find a credible translation that tells you if you don't vote this way, don't do that, then you're not saved. You won't find it. You won't find it. And this is the problem with contemporary American Christian culture. The first seed, they don't even believe, so they're obvious. These are people, I know people who used to believe, well, I heard when I was a kid, I believed it, and then now they're witches and they worship the devil and all that. That makes sense. The second seed, the rock, that's the most confusion to us because we are convinced that we don't realize that the Bible assumes obedience. The Bible, but that's a different video. We get confused by those people because they endure for a while, as Jesus said. They're the worship leaders, the pastors, the Christians, the people that we know, and then they walk away. And we're like, what in the world? But the third group is the most deceiving. We're the most confused by the rock people. The thorn people, we're the most deceived by because they don't walk away. They don't walk away. They don't think that they're not saved. That's why those people stood in front of Jesus and said, Lord, didn't we not cast out demons in your name? These people, that group of people, they don't think they're not saved. They think, as a matter of fact, we're adding to what salvation looks like because you got to apply it like this. We're fighting over all these things. People fight over stuff like the Sabbath. I'm watching Christians, they Sabbath, or they fight over election. I've watched people say, you're not a believer because you don't believe that God chose you before the foundation. You believe you chose God. You will not find a credible Bible translation, a passage that says your salvation or your maturity even hinges on believing whether you were chosen or you chose him. If I'm wrong, please show me and I'll make a video saying how stupid I was. But good luck. You won't find it. I'm not talking about Trump's Bible with the Constitution stuff. I'm not talking, or the Bible that Joe Biden said he read. I don't know what they talking about. But you won't find an incredible translation, any of that. None of it. But people will get offended. If I disagree, I did a video about Vodi Bakum and them, and people get offended. I'm somehow woke, even though, I'm woke. I'm Ephesians 5:15 woke. Awake, O sleeper. I ain't asleep. I'm not stupid. I pay attention. I understand the schemes of the devil. And I try to warn my church of that. These people don't believe they're not Christians, just like the people in Matthew 7. I'm not saying everyone who is into these things is not a Christian, but I'm saying, man, you got to be really careful. You got to be really careful. If Jesus said, loving your neighbor or treating others the way you want to be treated, he said in Matthew 7:12, that fulfills the law and the prophets. That's what he said. He didn't say, treat people the way they treat you. He said, treat people the way he said, that's the law and the prophets. I know I've failed over the years miserably in doing this. And the Lord has convicted me a ton over the years. And I've had to pull back and stay balanced and be like, nah, I failed miserably. And I've acknowledged, and I've had to ask some people for forgiveness, reconcile. I've had to make adjustments to how I interact online because I was a street dude. I was a gangster. I'm not afraid of anyone. Except the Lord, maybe. Maybe if I hear a noise at like 1 a.m, I might be like, what is that? Let's keep it 100, right? But I'm not afraid of people. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your influence are. That means nothing to me. I've been shot at point blank range. I done been in the trenches. I'm not afraid of anybody. So I can come off like I don't, ready for war. And it was like, man, I gotta scale back in that. What fruit of the Spirit is that? I had to ask myself, what fruit of the Spirit is that? I had to go after it. And passion is passion, but I think there's the largest group of professing Christians in America are thorns. They're thorn people. They're thorn. Not because Jesus had a crown of thorns, not having a thorn in their flesh like Paul that's making them like Jesus, but being choked out. Their faith is being choked out because they include all these other things and they don't even see it and they impose it on other people. And if you want to know, how do you know if you're doing that or not? How do you know, is it wrong to vote for this? Is it wrong to do this? No. We live in a culture. This is how you know if you're a thorn Christian. Here's how you know. If your character, right? If your character changes to sin against people, to be angry, offended, and all that, because people disagree with the cares of the world you have, the pursuit of riches you have, of money you have, right? Or if your character changes, then you know this isn't about the Lord at all. Because you should be able to still treat others the way you want to be treated if you're really trying to honor the Lord. James 3 talks about wisdom from above and wisdom that's from the earth. And when he lists unearthly wisdom, he says it's earthly, unspiritual, demonic, and it breeds selfish ambition and all this stuff. Offense and anger. If you're offended at other believers because they don't have the political philosophy, the ethnic understanding of you, if you think that everything, I think you may be a thorn believer. Especially when you don't even know these people. You're calling people's salvation into question by name, though. I'm not talking about generalities. I'm talking about by name. You're doing stuff like making songs, calling out people, conversations that no one else knows if that's true or not. No one knows if it's true, and you're making up these songs acting like you're giving a loving rebuke. And let me say this too, because I hear this a lot about loving rebukes. When you give a rebuke that's kind of public, like I'm doing right now, that's not naming any individuals, you're just speaking to the circumstances, I think that can be more loving rebuke. But people think that just because, or speak the truth in love, right? People think that just because I'm speaking what I believe to be true, that's loving. No, it's not. It's not. Because the Pharisees in Matthew 23 that I just talked about, Jesus said they're going to speak the truth to Moses, but don't imitate these people. Speaking the truth in love, Jesus adds or through Paul, adds the in love because it's possible to speak the truth and not be in love. If I say, excuse me, could you please shut up? Okay, you might be too loud. That might be true. But was that loving? No. But see, when we're so thorn, we're so syncretistic, we attach all these things, we think we're speaking, especially when we're talking to an individual. When we're talking and you don't know what we're talking about, okay, we're speaking to categories. When you're talking to and about people think just because you're speaking the truth that it's loving. No, sir, my friend. Husbands, do not be harsh with your wives, right? Fathers, do not exasperate your children. You could still be telling the truth about your kids, like, hey, you guys are sinning right now, but you could do it in a way that exasperates them. I'll say that for a different video. I'm saying all this because I'm going to make another video tonight that is sad to me. But it highlights this contemporary American Christianity that I think Jesus exposes. Now, obviously, he wasn't thinking about just us. This is paradigmatic of humanity. But I think Jesus exposes this particular culture. So the first seed, the devil takes it. These people don't even believe. Remember, all those people hear the gospel, and it's all four responses to the gospel. And everyone believes, but then different things happen. The first seed, the devil takes it. The second seed is the most confusing to us because it says they can endure for a while, but then when trouble comes because of the word, because they have no root, they don't really believe this thing. Whatever they believed was beneficial to them at the time. Maybe they thought, hey, if I believe in Jesus, my life will be different. And so they believe because of that. But they're not really rooted. They're not rooted. And so when it becomes difficult, when persecution, when tribulation come, I'm not with it. We've seen many people walk away. That's the most confusing to us because we think everyone who makes a profession of faith is going to be in heaven. And it's like, that's not how the Bible works. That's not how salvation works. God's not stupid. He knows who actually really believes in him and who doesn't. Even we know, even we would say, or even the world would say, actions speak louder than words. Even the world identifies that, knows of. We're the most gullible people ever because we think as soon as someone makes a profession of faith, they made it. But that's a separate video. But that's the most confusing of the groups of people. The third, the most deceptive, is that third group. They just add all these other things and make them necessary. Like, if it's necessary for me to vote a certain way, if it's necessary for me to think of an economic system this way, if it's necessary, then what do you tell all the Christians who live in Africa, who live in China, who live in Middle East, in Iran and Iraq? How do those Christians do that when they can't do that? See, when it's biblical, it can be applied everywhere. When it's not biblical, it's applied in your sphere, in your world. When it's biblical, it can be applied in the world. When it's not biblical, it's applied in your world. And a lot of this stuff that we're seeing in America it's masking array that's Christianity, love of country, love of this philosophy, love of this group of people, even though they're sinful, all this stuff, is choking out the word. I am desperately searching my heart and trying to make sure that I'm the good soil that bears fruit 30, 60, and 100-fold. This is speaking the truth in love right now. I'm asking you who are watching live or later, what seed are you? Really? What seed are you? Let's go to the tape. 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 You're going to do a video before the finals? Yep, I'm going to do it right before the finals, man. I got to. Thank you for not blasting me in that other video. I don't know what you mean, but hey. Kurt, glad to catch you live about the listen on the drive home. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. The parable or Luke 19 parable, which I think is really, are frightening. 100%, bro. I think it's one of the most frightening parables. I really think that. I wonder if cats like Ravi Zacharias fell into the second response. I think I would put. I mean, again, we don't know, right? We don't know. I think Ravi Zacharias was the third response, because it's like let's remember what it says. The third response says this. It says the cares of the. Let me do it this way. It says the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches and the desire for other things. So Ravi Zacharias had multiple, this is a money grab. He had multiple, and again, I don't know, I'm commenting on what you asked. I'm not trying to say, I would be hard for me to believe he made it based upon that. Grace is amazing, but I don't think the Lord's playing around. I think the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, I mean, he owned multiple massage parlors, making money. That stuff is a money grab. So I think him and many other people have fallen into the fourth one. Vic, glad to catch live video. Yes, resist the enemy's corruption of God. Yep, resisting falling apart under pressure, resisting conforming to this age. Yeah, 100%, brother. 100%. Thank you, brother. Rich, always on point. Thank you, bro. The fact that some professing Christians would even have the audacity Trump trial to Jesus, 100%, bro. Listen. I'm going to do a video called Can We Be Honest About Donald Trump? I should do one about Joe Biden, but Joe Biden, oh my gosh. I just think he's so obvious. You don't have people vying for Joe Biden like you do Trump. That's why I don't mess with Joe Biden a lot. It's not because I agree. I've never voted Democrat. Let me be clear for those of you who get offended when I attack the conservatives. I have never, as a black man from the hood, I've never voted Democrat in my life. I've never trusted the Democrats in my life. Ever. You will never find me registered as a Democrat. And if it was a clerical error. Never. I don't trust them at all. But I don't trust the conservatives either. But this issue of equating him with Trump, it's so hypocritical. Equating Jesus with Trump. Jesus got convicted at a sham trial, and I still trust him. I still follow him. Oh my gosh. Do you know that every one of the majority of Trump's former advisors, they're all felons? Do you realize that? That's a different video. I'm going to come back to that. I'm coming back to that. How can the Christian American experiencing the third seed, believing they are saved, and they understood that prosperity means you are blessed by God, much like the 12 apostles thought? Let me make sure I understand what you're saying, Ashley. How can the Christian American experiencing the third seed, which is choked out by the word, okay, believing they are saved when they understood that prosperity means that you are blessed by God, much like the 12 apostles thought? I'm not sure I understand what you're asking here, but I think if you're saying, how can the Christian American who is experiencing that seed believe they are saved? Because I think it's human nature to assume that prosperity, as you're saying, is blessed by God, right? I think it's human nature for them. But there's a difference between so we don't know how people were pursuing riches in the Old Testament. We know that the rich young ruler, when Jesus said it's easy for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, we know that the rich young ruler was like, when he told that about the rich young ruler, Peter said, well, who then can be saved? And Peter asked that question because in their minds, when you're rich, you're already saved. You got favor from God. And Jesus said, no, the rich are actually they're in the worst position because they have the kind of resources financially that doesn't lean on them to be dependent of God. So Jesus warned that. So what Jesus is, the reality is, when you're striving for riches, because this is the love of money is the pursuit of all leads to all kinds of evil, right? When there's a love for money, you will see evil. It will reveal itself. Like Jesus isn't complicated. Judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, right? What's the fruit? When you love money, it will be obvious. You will do evil things, right? That's why I think politicians, they're corrupt. They love money. They do evil things, right? When you love money, you'll do evil things. You're going to sin. When you love money, you'll force people to be slaves against them. Even if they convert to Christianity, you'll beat them, rape them, and do all those things because you love money. When you love money, you will go to war and end the racism. We always think of it as slavery and racism. I think we should look at biblically. We should look at American history through the lens of first and second greatest commandments. I think that's why there's not a conviction. That's why some Christians can defend slavery and some Christians are still bitter that it happened. I think we just have to view things through the first and second greatest commandments, the two. American history is replete with examples of decimating the second greatest commandment. You can't escape it. It's just the second greatest commandment. You just destroyed loving your neighbor as yourself. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, I'm sorry, because I didn't really understand it, to be honest. Man, your hype for the second video tonight makes me want to skip watching Bad Boys for the... Yeah, man. I mean, I don't, I'm going to go, I'm live streaming again at 8 o'clock, and I wanted to get this video out so that I could have that. Hit the like button, y'all. Appreciate it. Like and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate y'all. I will see y'all again tonight at 8 p.m. For a sad video, but it needs to be made, and it's going to connect to. It's going to be a life examples of what I said here. All right. Appreciate y'all. See you when I see you.